On this Friday night, police push back.
You will be arrested if you do not leave.
Dozens are arrested as police and protesters face off.
We're focused on returning our city to the place that we all know and love.
We'll bring you the very latest from the police operation happening now near Parliament Hill. Also tonight, evacuation order. Pro-Russian separatists tell civilians to flee Ukraine, fueling fears of an imminent Russian invasion.
The United States and our allies are prepared to defend every inch of NATO territory.
And the view from neighboring Poland, where officials are bracing for a rush of refugees. Plus, race to the finish. Canada's climbing medal count as the Winter Games slide into their final weekend.
Global National with Donna Friesen. Reporting tonight, Jeff Semple.
You will be arrested if you do not leave. Those with vehicles must leave.
We have the right to protest. That's a Canadian right.
Well, take a look at this extraordinary show of force in the nation's capital. Hundreds of officers from right across the country spent the day methodically pushing protesters out of the streets that they've been blocking for 22 days. Good evening and thank you for joining us. Tensions are running high in Ottawa tonight. Police have arrested dozens of protesters and towed more than 20 trucks. The operation remained largely peaceful for most of the day, but tonight we're seeing more clashes between police and the remaining protesters who are refusing to back down. And that police operation appears far from over.
We will run this operation 24 hours a day until the residents and community have their entire city back.
Officers are inching closer to the epicenter of the occupation, just outside of Parliament. That's where a large contingent of protesters remain, along with our Mike Armstrong, who has been tracking the situation for us and joins us live from Parliament Hill. So, Mike, what's the latest?
Well, Jeff, we've had vehicles leaving even over the course of the last hour. This has been very much the core, the middle of this protest. The vehicles that are leaving here are leaving voluntarily. The vehicles about 500 meters to my right, much less so. That's where the police operation continues right now and where it kicked off this morning at about 8 o'clock local time. Police started with what was effectively the eastern flank of the protest. Groups of trucks set off from the main protest site. They moved foot by foot, taking control of block after block.
The world is watching you right now. The world is watching Canada.
As police moved, there were skirmishes and arrests. In some cases, people appeared to want to be taken into custody. In other cases, it was clear they didn't want to go.
Can you take my sunglasses off so you can see my eyes? I'm not mean. I'm not a mean person. Hold the Lord.
Now, as the police line took control of an area with trucks, they would speak to the driver and ask them to leave.
Got a chance to get out now, or we're going to drag you out.
In the cases where the person refused, officers would break the windows and pull the driver out. Several vehicles were then towed away. As that was happening on the eastern flank, there were truckers in the main protest site who decided to pull out on their own. Protest organizers, meantime, continued to call on members of the public to try to join the protest.
The tactics are pretty obvious. Just get here, get into Ottawa, sit there until somebody listens.
Now, getting downtown isn't an easy thing to do. While there are officers facing off with protesters in one area, there are police checkpoints and roadblocks just about everywhere else. Access to the downtown core has been cut off for anyone who doesn't work or live in the area. Getting around downtown and in adjacent neighborhoods is a challenge. A much larger area of the city is now being seriously affected.
I'm not here to debate with you.
But also affected are protesters. If they're not in the downtown core already, they're not getting in. That's effectively cut off fuel supplies and frustrated many.
Hey, they're not going to have paychecks. Once this is done, they're all going to be out of work.
Please step out of the vehicle, sir.
Another protest leader was arrested Friday morning. Pat King, who's been a vocal presence since the beginning, was taken into custody. He posted his arrest online.
I'm being arrested by these officers right now. This officer here, they've cornered me, had me at the ready, and I'm being arrested.
Ottawa police have been keeping a running tally, posting it on Twitter. The latest numbers they've put out, 70 arrests, 21 vehicles towed. We do know that that is not a complete figure because they posted something recently saying someone threw a bicycle at one of the police horses and that person was arrested. They're also saying protesters have assaulted officers and attempted to remove officers' weapons. They're saying they're insisting, trying to de-escalate. Also, they're saying this operation will go on throughout the night. Jeff?
Mike Armstrong in Ottawa. Thanks, Mike. And that police strategy now being deployed to remove demonstrators is unlike anything seen in recent memory from other large-scale protests. It began as a slow, coordinated effort to push protesters out, but that situation now appears to be shifting. Our Ottawa Bureau Chief, Mercedes Stephenson, spent much of the day on the ground amid the protest, and she joins us now. So, Mercedes, how would you describe the police tactics that you saw out there today?
Well, Jeff, earlier in the day, they were not dressed in tactical gear. They were at the front lines just in soft hats and normal police clothing. There were layers of security back behind them, including the public order and mounted units that we're now seeing come forward this evening. And finally, the emergency response team and tactical teams behind that. So a layered approach, but essentially they were trying to push protesters back. This came after arresting, as Mike mentioned, a number of the leaders, which was designed to demoralize them. The hope was that they could convince people to leave if they simply pushed them away and took away the leadership. There was a desire to try to do this with as few arrests as possible from what I'm hearing, because every arrest, as you can imagine, is a lot of paperwork. And also the desire was to take back the area and then hold it so that people couldn't get back into those trucks. We are seeing that evolve over the evening as this is becoming much more confrontational after a lot of the people who have chosen to leave have left, and what you're getting is the people who are truly entrenched at this point. But in terms of what the overall police strategy looks like, we talked to Vern White. He is a senator now, but he's also the former chief of police here in Ottawa. Here's what he had to say.
I think it's about moving down, taking space each time you go down, take that space from them, remove the people who are refusing to leave, hopefully enticing a large number that, you know what, I came here for protest, I didn't come here for jail, I certainly didn't come here for a criminal record. And a lot of those people help them get out of the city.
And Mercedes, given the slow speed of the operation so far, how long is this enforcement effort expected to take?
Well, that's a great question. It was super slow this morning, and it seems to be speeding up significantly tonight as the police is using the mounted unit to try to push people back. But I spoke to Jim Bremner. He's the head of the Canadian Tactical Officers Association about how long he thinks this could take. Take a listen to what he has to say.
It's going to be inch by inch, and it's going to be based on again, each individual and how they want to acquiesce. I'm going to say we're probably a week away to clearing this, because it's going to take, at least an hour, hour and a half to clear each vehicle.
Now, at this hour, Jeff, a number of vehicles have cleared off of Wellington, which police sources were telling me were going to be the most difficult part of the street to clear. So that may take a little bit less time. But certainly this is a very fluid situation and it's evolving very rapidly. But the police are hoping to do this with as little violence as possible. And I'm sure some of the protesters are hoping for that, too. All
right. Mercedes Stephenson in Ottawa. Thanks. And let's go now to Shawn OShea, who has also been on the ground in Ottawa for us all day. And he joins us now from near the Chateau Laurier, just east of Parliament Hill. So, Shawn, how would you describe the mood of the remaining protesters there?
Well, Jeff, it's things have changed. And through the earlier part of the day, it was the hardcore people, the truckers, that sort of thing. But as the day has progressed, the afternoon has gone on, now we see hundreds of people who have just come from the community, who are supporting, who are blowing horns, who have their flags, and who are joining in this and making things more difficult for the police who are here, for the provincial police, Ontario provincial police, the Quebec provincial police. We just watched an arrest a moment ago for violation of the public safety, and so it's people, a lot of drinking going on, a lot of people who are here to have their voices heard, different voices heard, which have nothing to do necessarily with the original truckers' protest. So what, again, began early today as a fairly straightforward, we're not going to leave, now you have all these additional people who have come here today. And you got to remember that yesterday the police told people not to come to the community. They said that people should not, in fact, come because there would be problems, and they tried to cut off access here by virtue of checkpoints, but that didn't work, as you can see.
As I can see.
Completely different scenario tonight as it was yesterday. Jeff, we'll send it back to you.
Yeah, we'll leave it there. Shawn OShea in a very loud, very fluid situation in Ottawa. Stay safe. Thanks, Shawn. A class action lawsuit against the organizers of that Ottawa occupation is now expanding. Dozens of new defendants have just been named in the litigation, which now includes donors who contributed money to the campaign after February the 4th. That was the day GoFundMe canceled the initial fundraiser on its website, citing concerns the money could be used for unlawful activity. The lawsuit consists of thousands of residents and hundreds of business owners in downtown Ottawa. They're seeking $306 million in compensation. And the Canadian Civil Liberties Association says it plans to sue the federal government over its decision to invoke the Emergencies Act. The group alleges that act infringes on Canadians' charter rights and that the thresholds required to use it have not been met. The government's use of the Emergencies Act was supposed to be debated by MPs on Parliament Hill today ahead of a vote next week, but the police operation in Ottawa has put that debate on hold. The House of Commons did not sit today. The House Speaker says the debate was cancelled due to security concerns, citing the police enforcement on Parliament Hill. MPs are expected to resume those talks next week. Coming up, preparing for war. The U.S. president warns that Vladimir Putin has just decided to launch an invasion of Ukraine, just as thousands of civilians are ordered to evacuate. Welcome back. There is breaking news tonight on the crisis in Ukraine. Pro-Russian separatists are now urging hundreds of thousands of civilians to leave the disputed regions and head to Russia, claiming that a Ukrainian attack is imminent. Tonight, after holding talks with Western leaders, U.S. President Joe Biden responded with this.
It defies basic logic to believe the Ukrainians would choose this moment with well over 150,000 troops arrayed on its borders to escalate a year-long conflict.
The Kremlin insists without evidence that a genocide is now underway against Russian-speaking regions of Ukraine. Jackson Proskow reports on fears that pretext could be used by Russia to launch a full-scale invasion.
Sirens rang out over eastern Ukraine as the leaders of local pro-Russian governments told women and children to flee and men to take up arms. I have to leave my home, my apartment because of all of this, said this Russian-speaking resident. 700,000 civilians are reportedly headed to the border, as the self-proclaimed leader of the separatists released a pre-recorded video. A mass centralized evacuation of the population to the Russian Federation has been organized, he claimed. Evidence is growing that it may all be part of a Kremlin plan to manufacture a pretext for invasion. A vehicle exploded in Donetsk near a pro-Russian government building, what the U.S. State Department called a false flag. And Ukrainian intelligence warned Russia was prepared to carry out terrorist bombings that would then be blamed on Ukraine.
They will absolutely manufacture an operation in order to create the narrative that they want to gain the political outcomes that they're looking for.
The prospects for avoiding war seem increasingly dim. In Washington, U.S. President Joe Biden reiterated the dire consequences Russia would face after a call with Prime Minister Trudeau and other NATO allies.
Russia has a choice between war and all the suffering it will bring, or diplomacy that will make a future safer for everyone.
Adding to the tension, Russia has massive nuclear drills planned for the weekend that Vladimir Putin is set to personally oversee. The assessment has shifted from uncertainty to near certainty that Russia will launch some kind of action.
As of this moment, I'm convinced he's made the decision. We have reason to believe that.
With avenues for Putin to back down increasingly limited and time for diplomacy running out.
That American certainty about a Russian invasion seems to be backed up by events unfolding on the ground. Tonight, Russian media reports that a major gas pipeline in eastern Ukraine has suffered some sort of explosion. And at the same time, Jeff, the U.S. is all but certain that Russia is to blame for a series of cyber attacks this week that took down Ukrainian banks and government websites.
Jackson Proskow in Washington tonight. Thanks, Jackson. And with that threat of an invasion on the rise, Poland is now preparing for a sudden rush of Ukrainians to the border. Tens of thousands of people could be displaced in the event of a Russian attack. Our Europe Bureau Chief Crystal Gomansing is in Poland tonight and has more on the planned humanitarian response.
Tucked away in an industrial park, a symbol recognized around the world. In the city of Lublin, in eastern Poland, you'll find the Red Cross's largest base in the country, about 2 hours from the border with Ukraine. It's the Polish government leading plans to care for Ukrainians should they need to flee west.
I want to stress that we are ready to help those who will be forced to leave Ukraine.
The Red Cross anticipates there could be as many as 50,000 people crossing into Poland per day should Russia invade. The compounding effect could create a humanitarian crisis on a tremendous scale. While there's still lots of work to be done, the agency has some items in holding from 2021 when there was a crisis on the Polish-Belarusian border. Many refugees, mostly from the Middle East, were misled by officials in Belarus into thinking Poland was an open entry point into Europe. There are backpacks and blankets and cots, and some of these items will actually be repurposed for any Ukrainians who happen to cross the border.
At the first stage, there will be refugee camps organized near the border. Refugees will receive medical and social aid. However, those people must be transported as fast as possible, deeply into Poland territory, to Midland, and to the west, because those people will not be able to live for 1 week in gymnasium.
Relocating those seeking refuge could help Poland more easily absorb the large numbers of people. A similar strategy was used in 2014 when fighting first broke out in the east of Ukraine between pro-Russian separatists and Ukrainians. Polish government officials say they're being guided by the country's crisis management plans, and those will evolve based on the situation on the ground. Bottom line, Ukrainians will be welcomed. Jeff?
Crystal Gomansing reporting in Poland tonight. Thanks. At least 11 people are now missing after a ferry off the coast of Greece burst into flames. The ship was about 3 hours into its journey to Italy. More than 200 people have been rescued, including a couple of truck drivers who had to be airlifted off of the ferry. The cause of that fire is now under investigation. Canada's mounting medal count. Still ahead, more Olympic glory for Canadians in Beijing.
You're watching Global National.
The race is on for the last remaining medals in Beijing, with the Winter Games wrapping up on Sunday. And overnight, 2 Canadian freestyle skiers landed on the half-pipe podium at the same time. Defending champion BC's Cassie Sharp won the silver medal, while Ontario's Rachel Carker bagged the bronze, making her Olympic debut one to remember. It's Cassie Sharp's second straight Olympic medal after winning gold in Pyeongchang in 2018, and she did it just 1 year after undergoing major knee surgery. And Team Canada is also back on the podium in men's curling. Newfoundland and Labrador skip Brad Gushue steered his Canadian rink to the bronze medal, defeating defending Olympic champions the United States 8-5. And it was redemption for a determined Laurent Dubray. The Quebec native skated to a surprise silver medal in the men's 1,000 meters. The 29-year-old only just missed out on a medal in his signature 500-meter event and says that going the extra distance made it extra special. Next, after weeks of protests, how do Canadians really feel about COVID-19 vaccine mandates? Welcome back. Many of those protesters in Ottawa had set out to sway public opinion on the issue of COVID-19 vaccine mandates and restrictions. But after 3 weeks of honking horns and blocking streets, have they achieved their goal? Eric Sorensen has a deeper look at the demonstration and what it reveals about Canadian society.
The protesters did have successes, turning small numbers into a big voice.
Make Canada free again!
and forcing governments to respond.
We're going to win.
There was sympathy for what many genuinely endured.
I'm out here because I've been hurt so much by these mandates that I can't take it anymore.
But in one crucial way, they fell short, failing to spark a groundswell to turn around majority opinion. For many, the tactics were off-putting. The messaging at times extreme.
Traitors! Traitors!
And demands for immediate policy changes seemed unrealistic.
The mandates are still here, so I'm not going.
Most Canadians are fed up with restrictions.
I genuinely understand the frustration.
But saw them as a necessary evil.
Everyone in this country has to make sacrifices to keep ourselves safe, to keep everyone else safe. We're Canadian. We're not just a country of individuals.
One guy on his Ottawa balcony was turned into a mock Heritage Minute, profanely telling convoy protesters to just go home.
Walk around with your tailgate party and your goddamn nonsense. Nobody cares.
The vast majority of Canadians accepted the science that underpinned vaccination campaigns and other measures. British Columbia still has restrictions that the Premier says have made a difference.
We have been driven from the beginning on the best available science to protect people.
The policies were designed to save lives and keep hospitals from being overwhelmed.
Vaccinations certainly have made a difference in hospitalizations.
This infectious disease expert does say, in hindsight, mandates were coercive and says lockdowns and how people were affected should be examined for next time.
There has been a significant erosion of trust that's happened.
While protesters have called for freedom, others say vaccines restored the freedom to go out and feel safer doing so. That freedom of choice on vaccines ignores the risks.
There's no such thing as total freedom. Even people who choose to get unvaccinated, society pays for their hospital bills. We generally live in a society where we have to make concessions for the greater good.
The protests have revealed deep rifts in the country, and even the police crackdown is triggering a necessary debate. But the larger story of the pandemic is 2 years of collective perseverance by Canadians that is gradually seeing health restrictions finally lifted, which is what everyone wants. Eric Sorensen, Global News, Toronto.
And that is Global National for this Friday. I'm Jeff Semple. We leave you tonight with one final look at the situation in Ottawa, this overlooking Parliament Hill. We'll continue to follow this developing story throughout tonight and this weekend. Hope to see you back here again tomorrow. Thanks for watching. Have a great night.